Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the current state of judging, what can be done to fix it, what shouldn't be done to fix it. I'm also going to be discussing a judge you may not even remember the name of, but he is one of the worst judges of all time, and he possibly has the worst scorecard in all of MMA history under his belt. Let's get right into it. So firstly, let's get into some of the worst judges in MMA. I'm going to get into the worst scorecards of all time, but I'm also going to get into some of the worst judges in MMA right now. Firstly, we have Derek Cleary. Derek Cleary is one of the worst judges to ever step foot in the UFC octagon. He's one of the worst judges to ever score a card in the entirety of MMA. Derek Cleary is essentially brain dead. He is the judge that scored round 5 of Henry Cejudo versus Aljamain Sterling for Aljamain Sterling. Now, I did not have a channel at the time that UFC 288 Henry Cejudo versus Aljamain Sterling took place. However, I scored the fight for Aljamain Sterling 3-2. That does not at all, in the slightest, mean that Henry Cejudo in any universe lost the 5th round Aljamain Sterling. I scored it for Aljamain Sterling, but the 5th round 100% should have gone to Henry Cejudo. That round was not remotely close. Derek Cleary is an absolute idiot for scoring it this way. Henry Cejudo essentially went out there, bit down on the mouthpiece, took Aljamain Sterling down, and outstruck him in this round. It wasn't like Henry Cejudo went out there and just smashed Aljo in this round, but it was like he completely outworked him. There was no reality where I can see anyone with the MMA criteria, the MMA scoring criteria, scoring that round for Aljamain Sterling. It was a terrible scorecard from Derek Cleary. The second judge I want to get into is arguably the most famous of them all, Sal De Amato. Sal De Amato. Sal De Amato is probably the most consistently terrible judge in all of MMA. He's not worse than some of the other guys. He's not worse than Chris Lee. He's not worse than some of these other guys. But Sal De Amato, anytime he scores a fight, there is almost a 90% chance he scores an absolute dominant round for the loser of the round. I mean, he's not known for having the worst scorecards of all time, but you always see his name in bad news. You always see his name in the limelight. It's never a good scorecard from Sal De Amato. It's not the worst scorecard. It's just always a bad one. And because of this consistent, terrible work from him, he's kind of built up a reputation of being the worst. People know who he is. He's got so much repetition, so many bad scorecards under his belt that everyone kind of knows, who Sal De Amato is. And when there's a bad scorecard, they kind of associate it with Sal De Amato. And at this point, I mean, if you are this consistently bad at your job, if you're this bad at your job to the point where you are known by the entire MMA community as being the terrible, judge, you gotta find a new career. I've talked about this with fighters as well. There are certain fighters in the UFC that need to look for a new career. Sal De Amato certainly isn't a fighter, but he needs to find a new career. Judging clearly is not working out for him. Sal De Amato, he should probably be the guy that does the clapper. 10 seconds left in the round, Sal De Amato can sit there and do the clapper, because having him put his name down on a scorecard and add up simple 2-digit numbers is clearly way too much for him. Looking at, this fighter dropped this fighter in the round, he outworked him, took him down 2 times. Clearly that is too much for the actual brain comprehension of someone like Sal De Amato. It's absolutely ridiculous, and he needs to find a new career. The next judge I want to discuss, the third judge on this list, is one that probably has the most recent terrible round, and that judge is Mike Bell. Mike Bell is the judge that scored round 5 of Valentina Shevchenko versus Alexa Grasso 2 for Alexa Grasso 10-8. He scored a 10-8 round for the loser of the round. And I know people are going to get in the comments and say, oh my gosh, Grasso took her down. Grasso got her back and landed some ground and pound. That was some of the weakest ground and pound I've ever seen in my entire life. And although, both fighters put on an okay performance, and, there's an argument that Alexa Grasso won this fight, I do not believe the 5th round can be scored for her. Even if you think that, there is no way in any universe that could be a 10-8 round where she literally got outstruck, like she was getting pieced up for the first 3.5 minutes of this round, gets a fluke back take. And the fluke doesn't actually change what happened. It doesn't matter if it was fluke or intentional. It doesn't matter. She still got the back. She still landed some ground and pound. All of that ground and pound landed on the forearms of Valentina Shevchenko. Only a few shots got in there, and people were. I feel like it was because of the fact that, last time Alexa Grasso got the back with not much time to go, she finished Valentina Shevchenko. Everyone was kind of having that moment where like, oh my gosh, it's happening again. Valentina Shevchenko is about to lose. They weren't really aware to the fact that Alexa Grasso was doing almost nothing. It just felt like it. It's kind of this whole situation I went over in my Islam Makhachev video. Islam Makhachev, people really believe that Alexander Volkanovski won that fight just because of the hype of the moment. I believe there's a lot of hype when Alexa Grasso got the back of Valentina Shevchenko in that 5th round. And I believe that hype kind of completely swayed the minds of MMA fans. But for Mike Bell, a professional judge, for Mike Bell to go out there and score a 10-8 round for arguably the loser of the round, he needs to be fired immediately. He needs to be fired immediately. The Nevada State Athletic Commission, which is a complete joke, by the way, had to come out and they had to do not only a hearing, but they also had to do a training program for their judges to score 10-8 rounds. Just because of Mike Bell's horrible scorecard, they had to round up all of their judges and put them all through a 10-8 round scoring system where they had to watch rounds that were scored 10-8 and they had to score them themselves. They had to go over the criteria. This is all because of Mike Bell. This is one of the most atrocious things I've ever witnessed in my entire life. I've never seen something like this where an entire commission has to get their judges rounded up and go over to them, have to drill into their heads what an actual 10-8 round is. It's ridiculous. I know I've been mentioning Chris Lee in this video, but I'm going to refrain from talking about him in today's video. The judge I'm actually going to discuss, because he had a much more atrocious scorecard, is Jolo Dagan. Jolo Dagan has arguably the worst scorecard in all of MMA history under his belt. Jolo Dagan scored 3-2 for Marlon Chito Vera over Corey Sandhagen, which was a complete domination. Corey Sandhagen went out there and completely washed Marlon Chito Vera. Sure, Chito took no damage. The fight wasn't that exciting. At the end of the day, Corey Sandhagen went out there. He outstruck him. He kept Chito Vera in neutral the entire fight. He took him down with ease. He was landing brutal ground and pound elbows from the top. And he essentially, he left Chito Vera hopeless. Chito Vera had no moments of success in this fight. The only moment you can really point to is the very end of the 5th round. He had a little bit of a flurry with like 1 minute to go. That's it. For 24 straight minutes, Corey Sandhagen was piecing him up on the feet, landing some, just kind of outpointing him. It wasn't really doing damage, like I said, but he was just kind of outpointing him on the feet, taking him down with will, beating him up, and then the round would end, start back on the feet. Corey Sandhagen would be piecing him up on the feet with the point striking, take him down, ground and pound. Rinse and repeat every single round, and somehow Jolo Dagan still gave this fight 3-2 for the loser of the fight, 50-45. Corey Sandhagen, in every single universe known to man, there's not a single universe you can point to that's logical that Corey Sandhagen did not win this fight 50-45. Arguably 50-44 maybe in some of the rounds. It's ridiculous. Jolo Dagan needs to be fired immediately. And because of judges like this in MMA, we have been left with some of the worst robberies in all of MMA history. We have Paddy Pimblett defeating Jared Gordon 30-27 at UFC 282. We have John Jones defeating Dominic Reyes, one of the worst scorecards in MMA history. This is the clearest 3-2 I've ever seen in my entire life. And we have GSP defeating Johnny Hendricks by split decision. What an absolute atrocious scorecard. And you notice, what do all three of these scorecards have in common? Oh yeah, the more popular fighter won every single one of them. And it only points to this kind of recent narrative that's been talked about a lot. The UFC is becoming the WWE, and they're starting to favor star power much over meritocracy. And it's going to be the death of MMA. Now, before I get into what should be done to fix judging at MMA, I'm going to discuss what shouldn't be done in MMA. The first thing I need to discuss is this constant talking point. Oh, we need to get 10 judges in there instead of 3. Maybe it has to be an odd number so that, you don't have draws all the time, whatever. But I feel like there's this constant talking point of, oh, if we throw 5 judges in there or 6 judges, do you honestly think that having more brain-dead judges will be better than having 3? The thing we don't need, the thing we absolutely don't need is more of these absolute brain-dead judges. scoring these fights. We don't need more of them. That would only lead to even worse scorecards, and it would become way too complicated. Imagine Bruce Buffer reading out 10 scorecards before he announced the winner of the fight. It would take like 5 minutes to finally get the fight announced, to finally get the winner announced. It would be atrocious. I don't want to see more of these people scoring fights. The next thing that people constantly bring up is, well, why don't we just fire all these judges? I know even in my video, I've talked about fire him immediately. That's something I've said ad nauseum. Fire him immediately. Fire Mike Bell, fire Chris Lee, fire Sal De Amato. But at the end of the day, firing these judges is not the answer. See, the problem is there isn't enough of these judges. You wonder why there's so many bad judges. It's because there's no good ones. There's barely any good judges in MMA, and if we fire all the bad ones, there will not be enough judges in MMA. Now, you might be thinking, oh, well, if we fire all the bad ones, then the good ones will be the only one getting the work. As sad as it is, there is not enough good judges in MMA to judge all the fights. We don't have enough of them. It is what it is. It's the sad reality of it, and I wish more people would pursue a career in judging fights. Because if there were enough retired MMA fans, people that are, able to financially support themselves without relying on a job, which is judging MMA fights, which I cannot imagine pays a lot of money. You're being paid by a state commission. I can't imagine that's a viable career. And I wish some more retired MMA fans that are true students of the game, that know the game, maybe some retired fighters would get in there that don't have CTE, and they would judge fights. The last suggestion that I constantly hear is the worst of them all. And I understand people maybe have their own opinions on this. It's okay to have your own opinion on this. In my personal opinion, the worst suggestion to fixing judging is to have these judges answer to the MMA media. I constantly hear, oh, why don't we get these judges interviewed? Why don't we have them answer for their terrible scorecard? This guy scored Paddy Pimblett to beat Jared Gordon. Why don't we have him interviewed? He needs to answer for his crimes. As much as this person should absolutely pay, I believe they should pay behind the scenes. I believe they should not be put on some sort of stake. Because at the end of the day, if we are in a situation where judges are being put on an altar, they're being put on a stake to be interviewed by the MMA media, interviewed by MMA fans, it's only going to create a worse situation. The only thing it's going to do is pressure judges into making bad decisions. And it's going to create an ecosystem, a terrible ecosystem, a poisonous ecosystem where the UFC becomes more like the WWE. I've been talking about this all the time recently. The UFC will become like the WWE if we continue to shift the narrative, if we continue to give certain preferential treatment to fighters based on, how much star power they have, how many fans they have. If that affects judging, if we get to a point where based on how big of a star you are gifted scorecards because judges are in fear of getting attacked by the MMA community for giving a round to a controversial fighter that clearly won it, it will literally kill off MMA as we know it. On top of that, do we really want judges answering to the MMA media? The MMA media is arguably the worst and dumbest group of people on the entire planet. The MMA media is probably going to ask Sal De Amato, Sal, are you a lock to rob Paddy Pimblett this weekend? Are you a lock to get a robbery scorecard? They ask some of the worst questions I have ever heard in my entire life. Do you honestly want them asking questions to judges? Do you honestly think that's going to be the answer? They already asked terrible questions. Do you think that they're going to be answering? Do you think they're going to be asking these great questions suddenly now that they're asking them to judges instead of fighters? Absolutely not. It would be an absolute disaster. Now, I'm going to go over what should be done pretty quickly here, but what should be done is, one, we need to educate certain judges. There are certain judges in MMA that need to be educated on the rule set because they clearly don't understand it. Even though it's their full-time job, there are unbiased, unpaid MMA fans that understand the MMA rule set more than actual professional judges that are being hired by state athletic commissions. That is absolutely atrocious. And it's a complete disgrace to MMA. But like I said earlier, we can't afford to fire all of them. We would have no judges left. What needs to happen is we need to educate them and behind the scenes punish them by limiting their amount of work if they continue to not follow the rules, if they continue to break the rules and show severe bias or lack of understanding in the MMA rule set when scoring fights. The next thing we need to do is heavily push to find new judges. We need a larger pool of bodies. We need more people in the community. That will also lead to more bad judges, but we can weed them out. If we just have more people overall, there will be an excess of more good judges. Maybe there won't be many of them. Maybe we'll have to take on 100 bad judges to get 10 more good ones. But after that, we can start weeding out some of those bad judges and we'll be left with the good ones. The second to last thing that needs to be done to help judging in MMA is push commissions to take more action. Commissions usually don't answer any questions on this, and the first time I've really seen severe action by a commission addressing a scorecard is the Nevada State Athletic Commission and their action after Mike Bell's 10-8 round to Alexa Grasso, which she lost, after UFC Noche. You know what I mean? That was the first time I've seen a state athletic commission really come out and make some sort of statement. That's the first time I've seen them come out and do some kind of action and really work to try to fix the issue. You know what I mean? We never really see this from state athletic commissions. The state athletic commissions need to come together and do more to not only help the judges, but to speak out on what they're going to do to better judges in MMA. The last thing that needs to be done to fix judging in MMA is to not only give out more 10-8 rounds, but to give out more 10-10 rounds. I feel like there are plenty of rounds that are close enough to be a 10-10, and I also believe that there are a ton of rounds that need to be scored 10-8, but are just scored 10-9 because I feel like judges are kind of shying away from scoring rounds 10-8. I truly hope that with the Nevada State Athletic Commission coming together and doing an entire training program on 10-8 rounds, that we will finally have some definitive answers and finally see some progress with judging in MMA, and hopefully this will only lead to better judging. I hope you watched the video all the way to the end. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Leave a like, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.